Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign. To enable audio control, please enter your audio PIN followed by the pound or hash sign. If you do not have a PIN, just welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press *1 to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast.
Start broadcast. Can we push start broadcast?
Okay, ready?
Live on YouTube or Facebook?
Huh?
Live on YouTube or Facebook?
YouTube.
You have a start button?
I have a start broadcast
Okay,
button.
so ready? 3, 2.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Great, thanks. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jim Love. I'm the CIO of IT World Canada, ITWC, and I'm your host for today's webinar. And the webinar is called What You Need to Know About Managing Cybersecurity Incidents. Now, this webinar came about from a discussion I had with a friend of mine who's a CIO of a relatively small company. And he said, just with all this stuff's going on, can you just tell me what I got to do? And so we put that together. This is a half-hour format, so it's going to be a little tighter than normal, and we'll move through at a good clip. I want to hear what you have to think about that, but we tightened it up to a half-hour format. And then we have sort of Bill Maher fans out there in the audience. We have overtime, so we'll be there to take questions for about 15 minutes after the webinar is done. So please do that. We're trying to make these as interactive as possible, so please turn your pop-up blocker off and participate in the polls that we do. These will be great. After this, we'll send you a thank you email, and it'll have the presentations. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to take slideshot and whatever. Just sit back, relax. And we're also going to send you the business guide to cybersecurity that was prepared by our sponsor for this. You should get that by the end of the week at the latest. But please, after the webinar is over, take a minute to fill out the evaluation form. First of all, we're trying some new stuff, including broadcasting directly on YouTube. I'd like to hear what you think about all that sort of stuff, but we want your opinion so we can give you better content, and that's just it. So please do that at the end of this. That's it. That's my setup. Now on to the program. And when we talk about managing cybersecurity incidents in here, one of the biggest things that people find out is that if people do this somewhat effectively, they could become very, very, very effective and reduce their incidents, reduce their problems by about 50% or more, or at least a recovery time for at least that in there. So the question we have is how well would your company do? Do you know what's required? And do you know what's expected of you? And I brought my friend Michael Ball, who's here with me in the room. Michael Ball is the CISO and cybersecurity consultant. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Jim.
And Michael's going to walk us through this, and we're going to try and stump him on all these things. But we're going to start it with a poll. So let's go and we'll do the first poll in there. So come on in and just come in and this. So the question is take this as your impression. For the overwhelming majority of incidents, what is the best thing that describes you? Can you detect the incidents? Do you detect them and record them? Do you detect them, record them, and review them afterwards? Do you do a detailed review to actually improve your defenses after you've seen an incident, or you don't know in there? So that's it. Oh man, you're gonna okay. So I'm gonna bet with Michael on terms of what this is gonna turn out. So, and we'll show you the poll in a few seconds. So keep going in there. So we start watching them build in there. 21% detect incidents, 31 detect, record and review the impact,
Nice.
and 30% detailed review to improve our defenses. That's interesting.
Yep, I hadn't expected that.
Yeah, no, we were talking about this before. We figured that most of you would be in detect or don't know in there. So that's an interesting. So we're going to push the poll out to you and show you that in there. So we got a wide range of people out there, and that's great. So please, if you've got things to add to the ask a question box, and you can ask them throughout the webinar, but also put your comments in there as well. So we want to talk about this in terms of the real world. We show that the poll. We will move on to the slides now, I guess. So we talk about incident management in here, and here's the nightmare I have. I used to say, as a CIO, I don't have an alarm clock anymore. I wake up in the middle of the night screaming. So you think you've been breached? How would you know? First big question. Would you know? How would you know this is not an anomaly? It's really a hack or something's happened. When all this is going on, do you know what's been taken? Do you know what's going on in there? And then who do you notify and when? You wake the CIO at 2 in the morning and say, we think we've been hacked, right? Or this, I mean, who else do you have to notify? And your privacy commissioner, all that, what do you have to make a public disclosure? And this is all of the stuff that nightmares are made of from
That's right.
the hack in there. And this is the stuff you do, right, Michael?
This is the
come in.
stuff we do.
Yeah, so Michael will come in when somebody's got this. But in the middle of the night, you get all these sort of things, tick-tock, the clock is ticking. What are you supposed to do in there? And the answer is?
So there's a program that you need to put together, because you can't do this ad hoc on fly. You have to understand that incidents will happen, whether it's a full-on breach or just a minor incident. You need to have a plan put in place.
Absolutely, yeah. The first, we start with what is a breach,
Yeah,
right? What is a
absolutely.
breach? We've got some information on there on the slide you can see. But let's just go through that. So, and you can read this stuff later in there. That's great. We'll leave you the detail. But let's just summarize it. What is a cyber attack?
So a cyber attack is typically a malicious person or piece of software that is attempting to get into your environment to either disrupt or to acquire your intellectual property or damage your systems.
And how's that different from a breach?
So a breach is a successful attack. So once they've accomplished getting in and they've acquired your intellectual property, your employee list or customer list, or some material evidence that they can use for their own purposes or damage to harm you,
Yeah.
that would be a breach.
So cyber attack is what's happening. The breach is once they're inside and they're going to do something.
That's right.
Okay, so, and we'll talk about that. So that's the breach. That's the first thing you need to know in the middle of the night. Second thing you need to know is what your responsibilities are.
Absolutely.
Not curiously, in the world today, in Canada, PIPEDA, the Privacy Information Electronic Documents Act, it really gives us our guidelines in there, and it has some principles in there. And I think this is when you start developing these things, you start talking about the principles. You've got accountability.
Yeah.
You've got to identify the purpose of data. You've got to have consent. Those things. So it lists a number of purposes that are in there, and then it leaves this whole thing. On request, the individuals have to be able to know what data you have on them and all those sorts of things. And then it talks about compliance by the chief privacy officer. That was PIPEDA.
That was PIPEDA.
Gave us these principles. Great idea in there, and it'd be wise for somebody to review these things and actually look at them in terms of their own security program. But the reality is, you also have to, when you're dealing with PIPEDA, you've got to make sure that you understand now there are regulations with teeth. And this is something I've been going around doing a lot of work on in there. In the old days, that was great. You had the principles.
There was guidance.
Yeah, guidance. And you had a privacy officer, and so what? But now, as of November 1st, you are required to report any breach of the safeguards to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner when they pose a real risk of significant harm.
Right.
And that's why when we look at the difference between what's an attack, what's a breach. Now you've got to figure out what's a breach that can cause significant harm. And significant harm, they have a whole raft of things: bodily harm, humiliation, damage to reputation or relationships, loss of employment, financial loss, any of those things that people can do damage on. So that's part of it. Now this is this is where we started this conversation. Was you have to keep a record of not of breaches that cause harm. You have to keep a record of breaches.
That's
and
right.
be able to report that on request. And there's fines and these are fines, by the way. Just people want to know is somebody's going to get fined. And I'm not trying to do some big thing. You're going to do this, you're going to get fined. But somebody's going to get fined. Somebody's going to be made an example of, and that's just the way it goes. And these are not. You go to court and you defend yourself. These are administrative penalties.
That's right.
They say you pay. It's like getting a speeding ticket. Yeah, you can fight it, but why bother?
So in Europe, the GDPR, the fines have already started now, and some of them are up into the millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So,
And they're big. In Canada, I went through to try and find something comparable, and I said, when we put our anti-spam legislation, CASL, into effect, I went through, the average fine is like $80,000. But $80,000 for, and if you're a big company, it can go into the millions. But if you're the average small, medium-sized company, you want to part with $80,000? I mean, that's the thing
is the fines are meant to be punitive.
Yeah. But this this is, and we talked about it, that's the regulation part of it. We'll talk about this later, is there's real impact with your clients on this too, which may have more impact on you than is simply a fine. But that's the regulations you have to live within. And like anything governmental, once you hit their list, you better have your logs in place. So the question I had is, this involves, as we said, having a real understanding of what these things are and some policies. And we'll just go to the next slide here. We'll see that, the state of things is, we're not in really good shape.
No, and most companies don't actually have a policy framework put together, or if they do, they're, very specific policies and standards that they know they have. Password policy.
Yeah.
Everybody knows they have to have that. You have to have, a base security policy, maybe access control. That's kind of the end of it. Unless you're a large organization with, several thousand seats, you haven't gone through the exercise of building up this policy framework.
Yeah.
And you need it.
Yeah, and so they've got, and you said 43% of all breaches occur in small businesses.
Yeah, I didn't say that. Verizon
Oh,
report. Yeah.
No.
Verizon report, 43% of all breaches are in small companies. So if you're a small company that's part of the food chain, part of the distribution up to a larger company, you're going to be attacked so that they can get through you to the larger company.
And I think this is the big difference in security, is people have figured this out, is that small companies are worth breaching.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
now, in the old days, you could get away with it, you could sort of hide. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's true anymore. So what do you do about this thing? And one of the things, we'll talk about preparedness. We've got another poll for you, so we just go to another poll here. And if you had to pick one thing to be better, what would it be?
Yeah, employee awareness and phishing.
Yeah. Patching, you can't, don't tell him the answer. Don't listen to him. Put your own answer in there. Thank you very much, teacher, for giving us the answer. Employee education, patching of software, validation of backups, testing of security policies. Which ones would you pick up there? We'll give you some time to do that, and we're going to actually go back and show you we'll show you the answer. He's got the answer sheet here. No, I'm just kidding. So we'll publish it. But again, as the great Karnak here actually predicted, 62% picked employee education, patching of software, validation, testing of security. Now we did this. We asked you a rather unfair question. What's the one thing you would do? But we're going to show you another survey that we picked up. And I think that I got this from I forget where that's Katie. I should have marked it on the slide. But this is another survey that someone had done. Again, employee education, patching of software, validation of backups, testing of security. But policies is not named number one by anybody.
No, it isn't.
And the crazy thing is, you can't do any of this without policies.
That's right.
Yeah.
If your people aren't following the policies and you're not doing things in a regular, routine fashion, stuff is going to fall through the cracks.
Yeah. Okay. So just to cut to the chase on this, if you really only are working on one thing, you're going to be in trouble. And I agree, employee education is absolutely powerful. And I'm glad to see that's the forefront of everybody's mind. Mm-hmm. But policies, all of these things are there. So what do you need to do? What are the nuts and bolts of what do you need to do?
Yeah. So the biggest part is knowing that your business revolves around data.
Yeah.
So identifying where your data resides, classifying the data, and putting priorities and understanding around that. Okay. Making sure that your perimeter is secure, that you've got appropriate passwords or credentialed security, that you're reviewing logs.
Yep. You got to detect and keep track of the breaches.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the detection portion comes in several pieces of tools, but it's also eyeballs.
Yeah.
Taking a look at the logs yourself.
Okay.
You want to detect, you want to be able to stop it if you've got an opportunity, and then contain it.
Okay. And policies and procedures, you have to have those in place.
Yeah. Policies and procedures are what guides all this.
Yeah. And this is the other piece that we put in there, is testing your plan and auditing your partners. So I think that's there's two things.
Well, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about is your down chain business partners. You need to understand their security practices as well, and they need to be as strong as yours during your negotiations of the agreements.
Yeah, and I think the thing you said, 43% of small businesses breach. They get breached because they're a partner of somebody else.
That's right.
I mean, that's what makes them a target. Training, yes, but you got to build this in your culture. So that's what you need to do. Now, technically, what do you have to do in this?
Okay, so back to having a plan.
Yeah.
Okay, making sure, understanding that you're going to be breached someday. Okay, so don't, have the house burning down and not knowing what to do.
Okay.
Go through, develop a plan, test it. So on a regular basis, make sure that your executive team goes through a walkthrough, a tabletop exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you have your communications plan or your communications templates. So
Yep.
who's gonna talk to the press? Who's
Yep.
gonna talk to the board of directors? Who's gonna talk to
Yep.
legal and privacy?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure that that is already drafted, so when the breach happens, you just insert the incident.
Because you're not going
details.
to invent this as you go through.
No,
You have to.
you're gonna miss
it's-
something.
Well, you're gonna miss this, or you're gonna get in real trouble with somebody
Yeah.
in there.
Or different people are gonna be telling different stories
Yeah.
during the
Yeah,
event.
yeah. Or
Yeah.
worse, you'll be telling something you shouldn't have said in the middle of all this.
Absolutely.
You know,
And
we've
yes,
all
that
done
happens.
that. Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so the security basics in there: patch, backup, strong passwords.
Yeah, these are all very basic things, but you have to have all of them. They're all a little, notch in the chain.
Yeah.
So making sure, not only having a patch program, but making sure that you patch everything, that you understand what your priorities are.
Mhm.
So if a threat comes from the outside, you know what you're going to patch, and it's not carte blanche.
Yeah, yeah. And one of your points here says follow standard operating procedures. Now, and by the way, we're leaving with all of these things as a list and checklist, so you'll get all these things there. But that sounds a little bureaucratic,
No,
is that?
but from a security perspective, having a map to follow. So on a daily basis, these are the logs that I should check. These are the things that I should be looking for.
Yeah.
On a weekly basis, these are the reports that my executive want to see.
Okay.
It's by having that cadence and that pattern and that habit of doing the security routines that you're going to see the anomalies.
This sounds a lot like flossing.
It's-
Good
yeah.
for your teeth. But the other thing we talked about is
Let's
the
get rid of
insider.
plaque.
Yeah. We get the insider threat in there, and one of the points we were talking about this earlier is because but I trust all my people. We've known them for a long time. That stuff, but it's not always insidious.
No, it's not.
Sometimes just stupidity
Or thumbing the keyboard, or accidentally removing an entire directory when you meant to.
That
do a
wasn't me.
subdirectory. That
I
wasn't
told you that wasn't me. No.
Well, and one of the biggest ones is the opposite, is giving directories too many permissions so that one of the employees can accidentally do something.
Yeah, that probably was me. Yeah. No, and it's so we forget about the privileges we give to people, and sometimes those are not good for them even. You need to make sure that you've got your privilege. So that's the technical piece in there. So the question I have is, what about tools? There's lots of things out there. What should I have?
Yeah, I mean, so in the list here, I didn't even talk about firewall because that's kind of given,
Sort
right?
of the basics.
But endpoint protection,
Yeah.
and not just your workstations. So we used to call it antivirus, okay? Until they started creating, thousands of variants of a virus daily.
Yeah.
And, you can't keep on top of the signatures.
Yeah.
So they've stopped writing signatures so much. They still do, but it's not the priority now. It's more the anomaly detection, and so
Yeah.
they call this endpoint protection.
Yep.
There's a number of great tools out there for that.
Okay.
That has to be on your workstations, that has to be on your tablets, it has to be on your laptops, it has to be on your phones.
Phones.
Any device that connects to your network needs to be managed and secured so that the software that's running it, there's software running on your phone that's more sophisticated than you had on your laptop 5 years ago.
And I'm joking. I do you need, but people forget how much
Absolutely.
data is on there and what programs are on there, and that these are access to your corporate systems as well. Okay, so what else? Two-factor?
So two-factor authentication is nice and simple. We talk about complex passwords, but if somebody steals your complex password, you can secure that by having two-factor.
Yeah.
So they can have your password and your username, but it's going to call your phone or SMS, text message your phone.
And I hate seeing anything like this in a security presentation because people say, "Well, you're so smart, we're going to hack you." But I have two-factor on all my email now, and it's just because it just it's worth it.
It's that extra shield.
Yeah. VPN now, like people still use VPNs.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get into the internal databases or applications within your company, having the VPN with the two-factor authentication secures that tunnel. And that could be as simple as a dedicated HTTPS tunnel backend,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
But it's still a an encrypted transport
Yeah.
back to your backend.
And if you're not using HTTPS right now, then
Oh,
go to the
oh.
bottom of the class and we'll give you a
Even,
remedial
even
lesson.
browsers are stopping supporting just plain old HTTP. I think I don't know what the date is, but it's this year.
And I'm not making fun of it, but if that's not your basics right now, we need to talk to you as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Vulnerability scanners. What?
Yeah. So I know you're all doing patch management, right? The vulnerability
You saw
scanner.
it? Yeah, they're all doing patch management.
Yeah. The vulnerability scanner basically validates how well the patches are being implemented,
Okay.
and if they've missed any.
So this is a tool just to look at to
Yeah.
see what's not been patched. That's actually pretty decent. Log manager, and this is so you can actually
Yeah.
look at your
So-
logs.
Yeah. So every system.
Oh, we got some questions coming up. Sorry. We just
Okay.
got away from back in the control center. So better or worse, I think endpoint protection. I think Windows, PC, and servers when I investigate endpoint solutions. Linux server and mobile Mac is not really on the checklist. Do you have any recommendations in there? So and we'll get So I think endpoint protection in Windows, PC, servers. Any recommendations on
Yeah.
that?
So a lot of the vendors actually do support Linux from a command line perspective. They got, it's not the nice GUI that we're used to on a Mac or on a PC, but I know like Symantec and McAfee, Carbon Black, they all provide a a endpoint protection variant.
Yep.
It's a little bit more work to set it up, but they are there.
Okay. So, so the scripts we talked about the log manager, and that's always going through your logs is important,
Yeah.
but also hard.
It's very hard, and especially if you're doing this well, your logs are huge, and every single system is sending a bunch of logs. So that's where you have to develop scripts that will automate the process of review. So looking for anomalous activity, or looking for known things, back to the signatures almost. Looking for things that you know are not good or not part of malicious.
But you can't do this. You need the scripts in place. And external threat feeds. What are those?
So many vendors, even the the endpoint protection ones I was talking about, firewall vendors, Microsoft themselves,
Yep.
they provide on a very regular basis external feeds of malicious content, malicious activities that are happening on the internet right now. So, for instance, right now there's a remote desktop threat. There's an exploit that's if you're not patching it right now, go take a look and research this, get some patches on your Windows environment. But the threat feed will tell us there's an active exploit going on in Asia or in the UK, and to be looking for this.
Okay. We're just checking our questions again. So Alpesh says, can you speak to intrusion detection prevention?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of firewalls have services for intrusion detection and prevention. They basically, again, look for network traffic that is potentially malicious or not part of the normal traffic. Now, detection is exactly that. So it'll set up alerts and it'll generate logs, and you have to go and take a look at it. Protection is where if certain things happen that we've already vetted, we know that these are malicious or they're not part of our traffic, we're going to tell the firewall to just block them anyway. Okay, so that's the protection side of it.
So you're detecting anomalous traffic on one side of this, and then and putting in some protection for that as well.
Yeah, so you're remediating and blocking it immediately, and then a administrator will get alerted, and they may be able to open it up.
Okay, we'll put some contact details up here after this, and Michael can recommend or talk to you about some specific tools if you like in there. But those are, hopefully that answers your question in there. Threat hunting. What
Yeah, so this is the newest buzz. I mean, I'm going to say it's probably 3 to 4 years old now, and this is an active participation in the tools. So in the past, we've had intrusion detection and prevention where the tool would, if a packet went through that was anomalous or malicious, it would alert us, it would block it, whatever. With threat hunting, we're taking an active role, either personally as an individual or through machine learning tools, where we deploy something that will, again, with the vulnerability scanner, it will look through our network for potential weaknesses and then look to see if those weaknesses are currently being exploited. Are there new user accounts been generated that I can't account for? I didn't create them. Has somebody logged into a file server that they don't normally, that sort of thing.
So this is another level up. This is behavior
Yeah.
analysis. I know that this behavior can happen, but should it happen?
That's right.
And that's when you're starting to see things like new tools that come out that are using.
Yeah, there's a whole suite of tools now, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and
Yeah.
user-assisted tools
Yeah.
for specifically threat hunting.
Okay, and it's something to look in there. And then you talked about annual penetration testing and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
Part of that.
So a penetration test is a exercise where you engage a third party, and they have their own hackers, and they will, depending on the level of engagement, they will pretend to be an adversary and try to break into your environment
Yeah.
and show you where your gaps are.
Okay. And
Okay.
they're all 13 and live in their basement.
That's right.
Yeah, no, okay. No, they're professional. I get it. They're professionals. Sorry. And okay. So how much do I have to spend to put all this? This is a lot.
This is a lot. So
You know.
yeah, there's commercial tools that can do this.
Yeah.
And if you're a larger enterprise, you're going to go to the full commercial tools throughout the stack, simply because they come with regular annual renewals, updates as they come. The vendor may help implement. You can get third-party companies that will help design and architect.
Okay.
So that's on the high end. If you're budget conscious,
Yeah.
there's a number of open source tools that the tools themselves are as good as the commercial tools. They just don't come with a supply chain of services behind it. For instance, on the vulnerability assessment, there's a wonderful tool called Nessus.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to disparage the others, I just pulled that one
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So Nessus, many times a day, updates its database of known threats.
Yep.
Okay? Now there's an open source version of it called OpenVAS. And the difference between the two is the amount of support you get,
Yeah.
a wonderful user interface, and on the OpenVAS, on the open source one, the database is maybe a day or two behind.
Yeah.
When you're scanning monthly, a day or two behind doesn't mean an awful lot.
Yeah. Okay. So as a
Okay.
practice, so and because I think there's a legitimate fear is you security guys are going to sell me a whole pile of stuff or ask me to buy a whole pile of stuff, some of which I need, some of which I don't.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you can start off.
Supposed to have a better answer than that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You can start off with the open source stuff.
Yeah.
Your security provider can help you implement that.
Yeah.
So there's still services for them,
Yeah.
and they will generate the same logs, and you can manage it yourself,
Yeah.
or you can go to a managed security provider who can do the soup to nuts.
So how do I know if I'm buying too much?
So we've talked about the various areas that you need to protect.
Yeah.
If you've got something in there to protect each one of those areas in the stack,
Yeah.
you've got enough.
Okay.
If you're double dipping on tools, if you've got multiple tools doing the same thing, you're probably too far in.
Okay. Good. So, but ask questions, right? If
Yeah.
you've got somebody in who's doing security for you, like the stuff you do, ask them questions.
Absolutely.
Because I think we talked about there are different ways to approach this, and considering your budget and what you
Most
can do.
of us will be happy to talk to you, half an hour discussion, just understanding, where your priorities should be.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's just go back. So that's the tool piece of it. We'll quickly go through it. And again, we're leaving you with a lot of this stuff as a bit of a toolkit, but the anatomy of a breach in there. So we've got that in there. So we have more questions. We got lots of questions. We may run a little longer. Can you spell the open source vendors? We'll do even better than that. We'll give you a list at the end of these
Yeah.
of open source vendors. So you don't have to worry about the spelling on this stuff. Michael will
Yeah,
write down.
we'll put that
We'll
together.
we'll hold them down, make them write down which ones they are, and we'll send them out to you later. Great. Okay. Anything else? Will these slides be available? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll have it for you then. Okay, so we'll go on. Let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a breach, and that's some of the things we want to talk about. Is we've talked about. I think we started at the beginning of this with the story of there, and most breaches start with phishing. You were saying.
Yeah, almost all breaches today start with phishing. That seems to be the most bang for the buck
Yep.
as far as the adversary is concerned. And so having a phishing campaign
Yep.
in your environment during your security awareness
Yep.
is probably the most value I can say.
Yep.
Okay? So the adversary crafts a wonderful email, sends it off to somebody in your executive,
Yep.
and they click the link, they open the PDF file, and they put their credentials in to unlock it.
Mhm.
Those credentials now go back to the adversary, and they can then test those credentials within your environment. Most of the breaches are a slow, iterative assessment. So they'll get one set of credentials, they will see where they work within the environment.
Okay.
If they get access to a machine, the credentials may not even be administrative, they might just be Joe user. However, on Joe user's machine, if help desk helped them do a patch or whatever, there may be other credentials on there that do have administrative access.
So basically, the way you get in,
Yep,
most
get
breaches,
a machine,
yeah, and then hide.
and then they move
investigate.
laterally.
Yeah,
You know, they move laterally across systems,
yeah.
and they try to stay under the radar. So low and slow, they only do a couple things a day, and scanning your environment in a very slow manner that you're not going to see it in your network.
Yeah.
And
There's this myth that everybody hacks in and they do all this damage, and that's how we're going to detect them. But the reality is, they get in,
Yeah.
they spy, they work their way in there, and they find out about you, so that they can actually do a real attack if they want to do.
Yeah. So they say that most statistics are made up on the fly.
Yeah. I think 98% of all statistics are made up of the fly.
So
Yeah.
somewhere around 6 to 8 months before you detect that somebody's in your environment.
Yeah.
So they'll break in, they'll do the reconnaissance. The first stage of this is just a standard reconnaissance. What systems do you have out there? What types of databases do you have? Where's your intellectual property? What type of customer data can I get access to? So they stay in, again, low and slow, and typically they're going to be there 6 to 8 months before you even notice they're there, if you notice at all.
Okay, so we're going to go through this next bit quite quickly, and I hate that when people just click by slide, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on stuff. But because we did want to leave you with, like I said, a kit of things. So the breach is happening: phishing,
Yep.
malware.
Going home, clicking on that late night website on your laptop, getting a piece of malware brought down to your laptop, going back to the office, plugging it into the network, and infecting every machine around you.
And hackers as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so that those are the three elements that we're dealing with. Now, social engineering. I do want to spend a minute on that or so, because
Yeah.
I think that's a piece. Social engineering getting to be a big one in there. Go to the next slide on this in there. So and that's this is where people fool you into giving you their credentials.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there's a YouTube out right now. It's one of the local newscasters just walking down the street with a microphone,
Yeah.
and talking to individuals. And I know that you need password security. Most people just use the name of their cat. What's your cat's name?
Yeah.
And through like a 3-minute exchange of conversation,
Yeah.
the person actually gives their password to the
Yeah, I've seen it, and that's just sad. So social engineering, but it's not because people are stupid. These people are clever.
Yeah.
They're like pickpockets
their
for
job.
your mind.
This is what they're trained to do.
They will work a way to get your password from you in there. And if you haven't been social engineered, you will be at one point. So that's one. So phishing we talked about in there, and we talked about already. This is a legitimate way of using some honest type thing. And one I've seen recently is you come in and I forget where it was, come and change your password. Thank God that we've trained people to actually say, if somebody asks you to change your password, just come and show it to us. And we've seen those.
So it just came out in the news this week that the city of Burlington was socially engineered into giving up $500,000.
Wow. Whoa. Okay. So
Right?
that's
So it can happen.
Yeah, no, and it certainly can. So phishing stuff, and there's one going around right now and it's just so perfect, but it's you get something and somebody says, I saw your company on the internet and I'd like to apply for a job, and you get and first of all you look at that and say, I'm not opening this link, and then because we have 2 or 3 companies, I saw the same email come in through all these things. I went, oh, do one. But there's a new one every week, it seems. So that phishing in there. So how do you avoid phishing in there? And I think that some of the training is one of the things, don't click the link.
Yeah.
Totally
Or
right.
hover over the link and make sure that the URL that's showing up under the mouse is the same URL that's there and is legitimate.
And we've got a training kit we're actually going to launch in the next couple of weeks from IT
Perfect.
World on phishing and password security. So watch for that, and we'll send everybody out there a reminder of where this is as well, because there's some good training on these things. But the basic training is you never give your password to anyone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that's and verify any person who phones. And my poor friend Roberta got hacked. I know she got hacked because she sent me something saying, and it was just out of the normal for her.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent her back an email back, and of course the auto reply comes back, my account's been hacked, please don't answer the email. So one of the things is, if somebody sends you something, even if it's a friend,
Yeah.
check it. Say,
Yep.
we send it back, you say, Michael, did you really send me this? You know, and that's right, it's worth the time in there. Okay.
And so if the help desk calls you up and asks you for your password, don't give it to them.
Yes.
And if you're on the help desk and you're asking your customers for their passwords, shame on you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a, and you don't give your password even to IT in an organization.
No.
You make people, and Matt people will hand you your computer, say put your password in, and that's important. Yes, if you're on the help desk and you are asking for the passwords, you're part of the problem. Okay, so leading malware threats in there. I love now some typos are just great. Leading malware treats.
Treats.
Yeah.
Treats.
Yeah,
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
here's some treats for you. Yes. So ransomware.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody knows what ransomware is now. From what I understand, it's stabilizing now. It was on the rise throughout 2018.
There's a couple cities. They're picking their way through cities now.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's still going.
Yeah.
But the rampant rise of
It's not growing at 300% anymore.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Just because somebody says the press says it's not growing at 300%, it's still out there. It's still big.
Yeah.
So you got viruses, worms, Trojan horses. I think most
still
people
always
root kits, and that's some of the things we talked about.
Yeah,
in there.
earlier. So basically just again, software that gets access to the base of your operating system and can run under the covers.
Okay, and botnets. Now this is a fairly big thing out there.
Yeah. So the Stuxnet and different things
Yeah,
are where a piece of software will infect things like web cameras and
Yeah.
printers and home routers, and then collectively use them to launch a denial of service attack on something else.
Yeah. So it's not just your computer anymore.
No.
Any device. Okay. So that's the leading malware treats in there for you. Hackers. Let's talk about hackers a little bit there. And you've got 4 types of hackers you talked about: cyber crimes, cyber espionage, cyber warfare, activism.
So these are just the various motivations that a hacker could have. So, from crime itself, just scanning and trying to acquire something personally.
Yeah.
Espionage to provide reputational damage or actual damage to a company. Cyber warfare, it could be company to company, or it could be a state actor.
Yeah.
Okay, trying to really damage a company. And then hacktivism is the people that are trying to get their message out there by causing damage.
Yeah. So different stages, but still all equally problematic.
Yeah, and the tools are all the same, and the methodologies are similar.
Well, yeah, and the tools are available on the internet. You can start your own franchise out there. Yeah. So that's the world we live in. It is, some of it's old, some of it's new in there, but there's a lot there. So let's go back to leave people with this whole thing. An incident has happened, and I've followed some of your advice, and I'm starting to look at my logs, and I can find ways that I detect it. What are the stages I have to go through?
Yeah. So this chart that's up here right now, I did not do this at all. This is the what they call the kill chain.
Yeah.
Okay. So initial discovery and reporting, identifying the actual threat itself.
Yep.
Okay. Evaluating how much damage was done, what was viewed or taken.
Yep.
Is there any intellectual property? Is there any personally identifiable information, privacy information?
Yep.
Okay. How do I contain it?
Mhm.
So moving into a method of stopping the spread.
Yep.
Okay. Eradicating, so basically getting rid of the infection. Recovering, so what data was lost, can I recover it? Can I recover my business?
Yep.
Okay. And then doing a follow-up, because chances are, if you've been breached,
Mhm.
the methodologies that they use to breach you, if you haven't fixed those, they're going to try it again.
Yeah. So that's our basic. Let's go back to our first, where we started with this. And some people said, "Well, I'm not very good at this." All the way up to we're doing this. We're looking at this. If you're not aware of that universe and you're not following something like those stages, then you're probably not as good as you think you are in there. And if you're not, if you don't understand any of this at all, that's okay. You know, you
Absolutely.
came to this webinar, you're starting to take a look at this thing. Don't get into this idea that we have to know everything. There are people around in places you can reach out for help. But that's the world that answers the question, my friend, is what do I have to do? The answer is a lot. But
Yes.
the flip side of that is if you don't, you risk your partners, you risk your business, you risk stopping your business, and you risk potential fines for the government. It's a
Yeah.
huge risk for you.
I put a note in here, not meaning to be flippant, but your first breach will probably be more expensive than building the protections to secure it and potentially getting a managed service.
Yeah, and we actually compared the actual answer to that is if what you'll spend on this security or the effort you'll put into it, one breach you could spend all that effort and maybe more.
That's right.
Okay, so your final thoughts is there are two types of companies: those who've been breached, those who don't know you've been breached. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. It's those things. You will be breached, and it's
some
more and
point in
more
time
even
you
as a
will.
small business, you will be breached as a bridge to a bigger business in there. It will affect you. So that's what you got to do. So we've left people with all of these things, and would be interested in what the feedback is on this, showing you the whole world of this. How do you meet somebody like you because if I'm watching all this and I'm saying, I either know how to do this, in which case I'm refreshed, that's great.
Yeah.
You don't know how to do this, I'm still in the early stages. What can they do? Can they get hold of a guy like you and
Yeah, certainly there's a number of us out there. LinkedIn is a great place to just take a look at cybersecurity, but we're going to put some notes in this when we hand it out anyway.
Yeah. Well, why don't they call you?
Absolutely. So
You're the big sales guy, Michael.
Yep. Give us a call. We'll do a half-hour interview.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
assess whether you have a plan in place and,
Yeah.
and what your roadmap is to getting that plan in place.
Yeah. So you do a bit of an evaluation, tell people where they're at, and then help them
Yeah,
through
we
that.
call it a maturity assessment.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So
Good stuff in there. So thanks a lot. This has been fabulous in there. And just as a wrap up, we'll check if we have any questions. We'll hang around for a few minutes. If we don't have any questions, then we'll wrap up. Because I think we've been taking them throughout the piece. But we will send you all of these slides. We'll send you some of the materials that Michael uses and an invitation, and you can contact him. And my email's up there. You can get a hold of Michael through me, or we'll send you his email address with the follow-up email that we have in there, and you can talk to someone like Michael and get the first hand. So if your question is what do I have to do, hopefully we've answered that. If your question is now I know I have to do all this stuff but I couldn't possibly do this myself, then contact Michael and get a little bit of at least a phone call to see where
we'll do an assessment. It's easy enough to put together an on-site and just go through what you've got for tooling
And the last question in here, can you share some tools in there? We're gonna let people go now at this point, but if you have questions, we will continue to follow them up for a few more minutes. So that's our formal webinar. Can you share some tools?
Yeah, so I will put together a sheet as we talked about the various layers in the security stack.
Yep.
I'm going to put together a list of some of the commercial tools as well as some of the open source tools and links to get them.
Cool, good stuff. Okay. Anything else with the questions? So that's a wrap up in there. We'll hang around for another couple minutes and answer them for you. But thanks a lot for coming, and we'll see you again. And this will also be available for replay if anybody wants it. Thanks, I'm Jim Love of IT World Canada, and this has been Michael Ball from Performance Advantage.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.